My name is Michael Evans, and for 58 years, I believed I was living my life. I had a career, a home, a routine. I thought the big questions had all been answered. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October, I found a letter that unraveled everything I knew about who I was. It was tucked inside my mother's old recipe box, a place she said held all the secrets to a happy home. I was cleaning out the attic after finally deciding to sell the old house, the one I grew up in. The box was sticky with time, the wood warped. I opened it, not looking for answers, just trying to see if there was anything worth saving before I tossed it. Beneath her faded, handwritten card for lemon pound cake, there was a sealed envelope, yellowed and brittle. My name was on the front, not in my mother's flowing script, but in a sharp, unfamiliar hand. A cold dread, the kind you can't explain, settled in my stomach. I sat down on the dusty floorboards, my knees cracking in protest, and I carefully tore it open. The letter began, "My dearest Michael, if you are reading this, then your mother, Catherine, is gone, and she has taken the truth with her. I've asked her 1,000 times to tell you, but her fear was always greater than her courage. So it falls to me, now, from beyond, to give you the pieces of yourself that you have been missing." My breath hitched. Catherine was my mother. Who was this? "Your mother was the great love of my life, but I was not the great love of hers. We were young. It was the summer of 1964. Her heart belonged to a man named Joseph, but he was gone, shipped off to a war that no one understood. She was lonely. I was convenient. We had one summer together before she realized she was pregnant with you." I could feel the blood draining from my face. The attic seemed to grow darker, the rain pounding a frantic rhythm on the roof. My father's name was Robert Evans. He had died when I was 15. He was a quiet man, a mechanic, with grease perpetually under his fingernails and a gentle smile for me. I had spent my life missing him, trying to be like him. When she told me I wanted to marry her, I loved her and I already loved the idea of you, but she refused. Joseph was coming home. Joseph had a future, a family with money and standing. I was a carpenter's son with nothing to my name but a set of tools and a dream. She made a choice, Michael. She chose the security Joseph offered for you, and she convinced Robert, the man you call Dad, to give you his name. He loved her enough to do it. He was a good man and he raised you as his own, which is something I will be grateful for until my last breath. Tears I didn't know I was holding back began to fall, splashing onto the fragile paper, blurring the ink. My whole body trembled. The man I had idolized, the man whose old flannel shirt I still kept in my closet, was not my father. My entire childhood, every memory of him teaching me to throw a baseball, of him holding my hand in the hospital when I had my tonsils out, every single one was now being viewed through a distorted, cracked lens. Were his smiles to me genuine, or was there always a secret hidden behind his eyes? The grief for him, a grief I thought I had long since processed, came roaring back, fresh and agonizing. I was mourning him all over again, but this time I was mourning the loss of the truth of him. The letter wasn't finished. "I never stopped loving you, son. I never stopped watching you. I was the man who fixed the fence in your schoolyard when you were in second grade. You brought me a glass of lemonade. You had a gap in your front teeth and my exact same cowlick. I was in the crowd at your high school graduation. I saw you get your diploma. I saw you marry Sarah. I stood at the back of the church, my heart so full of pride it felt like it would burst. I have pictures of your children, my grandchildren, in my wallet. I watched you become the man I always knew you could be, even though I had no hand in shaping you." A sob ripped from my throat, raw and painful. All these years, All these years, a ghost had been haunting the edges of my life, and I never knew it. I thought of the kind older man at the schoolyard who had patted my head. I remembered a stranger's face in the crowd at graduation, a man who held my gaze for a moment too long, his eyes shimmering. Had that been him? My real father? The weight of his silent, desperate vigil was crushing. The loneliness of it was a physical ache in my own chest. He had been there, loving me in the shadows, while I loved a memory in the light. The letter was signed, "With all the love I was never allowed to give you, your father, Samuel Jenkins." Samuel Jenkins, I whispered the name. It felt foreign on my tongue, meaningless. But it was my name too, my biological name, Michael Jenkins. Who was that man? I didn't know him. I was Michael Evans. I had spent 58 years being Michael Evans. I sat there for hours until the rain stopped and the last of the light faded from the attic window. The world outside was quiet, but inside my head, it was chaos. Every memory, every cornerstone of my identity was now a question mark. The love I felt for my late father, Robert, was it built on a lie? The mysterious, aching absence I had felt my whole life, a hollow space I could never quite name, was it the shape of Samuel? The love my mother had for me, was it tainted by the secret she kept, by the choice she made out of fear? I felt a profound, disorienting sense of loss. I had lost 2 fathers in one afternoon. One I thought I knew, and one I never got the chance to know. I was adrift, a boat whose moorings had been suddenly cut. The past was not a solid country I could revisit anymore. It was a mirage, and I was left standing in the ruins of my own history, clutching a piece of paper that felt both like a precious gift and a devastating curse. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. The week after finding the letter was a blur. I moved through my days like a ghost in my own life. I'd be talking to my wife, Sarah, and my mind would be 1,000 miles away, in a dusty attic holding that secret. I'd look at my own children and wonder what pieces of me, of this Samuel Jenkins, were in them, hidden in their DNA, in the way my son furrowed his brow or the way my daughter laughed. I felt like a fraud. The name on my driver's license, the history I recited at family gatherings, the stories I told my grandchildren about their great-grandfather Robert, the mechanic, it all felt like a performance now. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I had to talk to Sarah. I waited until the house was quiet, after the kids had gone home and we were sitting on the back porch with their coffee. The night air was cool. I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth filling my lungs, and I told her everything. I showed her the letter. I watched her face cycle through shock, confusion, and a deep aching sorrow for me. When I finished, she simply reached over, took my hand, and held it tight. She didn't say anything for a long time. "All these years," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "all these years, you carried a hole inside you, and I never knew what shape it was. Now we know." Her words unlocked something in me. The hollow space had a name: Samuel. The next step was terrifying. I had to know more. I had to know if he was still alive. The letter didn't have a date. He could have passed away years ago, leaving this message as his final, lonely act. The thought filled me with a new kind of grief. The grief for a lost opportunity that was so colossal it was dizzying. I spent days online, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard. I searched for Samuel Jenkins, carpenter. I found an obituary for a Samuel Jenkins in a town 2 hours away. He had died 4 years ago. My heart sank into my shoes. I was too late. The chance to look into my father's eyes, to hear his voice, was gone forever. I felt a wave of anger, at my mother for her silence, at the world for its cruelty, at myself for not finding the letter sooner. But then Digging deeper, I found a mention of him in a local newspaper article from a decade prior about a community center he had helped build. And in that article, it mentioned he was survived by a daughter. A daughter? My sister! I had a sister! Her name was Laura Jenkins Miller. She was a teacher, living just an hour and a half from me. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart hammering. I had a blood sibling out there in the world who had no idea I existed. Did she know about me? Did Samuel ever tell her? Or was I his secret just as he was mine? I drafted 100 emails to her in my head. How do you introduce yourself to someone as their long-lost brother? Hi, I think our father, whom you knew and loved, was also my biological father, a fact my mother took to her grave. It sounded like the plot of a bad daytime drama. I was paralyzed by the fear of upending her life, of causing her the same seismic shock I was still reeling from. For 2 weeks, I did nothing. I carried Laura's name with me like a live wire. I looked at pictures of her on the school's website. She had his eyes, Samuel's eyes, our father's eyes. She had a kind, open face, and seeing that small physical proof of our connection was both comforting and utterly terrifying. Finally, it was Sarah who gave me the push I needed. You have a right to know your story, Michael, she said softly, and so does she. You can't unknow what you know. You have to see it through. So I wrote the email. It was short, clumsy. I identified myself as Michael Evans. I stated that I had recently found a letter from a man named Samuel Jenkins, who I believed was my biological father, and that my research suggested she was his daughter. I said I understood if this was a shock and that I would respect her privacy, but that I would be grateful for any chance to connect. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The wait was agony. 48 hours of jumping every time my phone chimed. Then her reply came. The subject line was simply, "My God." Her email was emotional, but not angry. She wrote, "My father talked about you, not often and never by name. He would get quiet sometimes, especially around the holidays, and he'd say he had a regret that shaped his life. I never knew what it was. Now I do. I would very much like to meet you, Michael. I think I've been waiting to meet you my whole life, too." We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our towns. The drive there felt like the longest of my life. I was a 58-year-old man feeling like a nervous teenager on a first date. When I walked in, I saw her immediately, sitting at a corner table, clutching a coffee mug. She looked up and our eyes met. She had our father's eyes, but in that moment, I saw my own reflection in them. She stood up, her eyes filled with tears, and without a word, we hugged. It was a hug filled with 58 years of absence, of unanswered questions, of a shared, silent grief for a man we both loved in different ways. We talked for 4 hours. She told me about Samuel. She showed me pictures. He was a quiet man, she said, a wonderful craftsman, but prone to bouts of sadness he could never explain. Now she knew why. She told me he was a good father, a loving grandfather to her children. She gave me the one thing I thought I had lost forever, a connection to him. She gave me stories. She told me he loved old westerns, that he whittled little wooden birds, that he made the most beautiful cherrywood dining table she still owned. I wasn't replacing Robert. I could never do that. The love I had for the man who raised me was real and enduring. But I was finally, after a lifetime of feeling a piece was missing, making room for Samuel. I was building a new history, not from scratch, but from the fragments he and my sister had kept for me. Leaving the cafe, I didn't feel like a different man. I still felt like Michael Evans, but now I also carried the weight and the gift of being Michael, son of Samuel. The past was no longer a ruin. It was a complicated, painful, but ultimately beautiful landscape that I was only just beginning to explore. The truth hadn't destroyed me. It had, against all odds, made me more whole.